Okay, so you've got that big project on the Industrial Revolution. I know, it's one of those topics that just feels huge, and you're probably wondering, where do I even begin? Well, don't worry, that's exactly what we're here for. We're going to break it all down together, piece by piece, so you have everything you need to build an amazing project. Really, it all comes down to one massive question. What actually happens when new machines completely flip the script on how we live and how we work? That right there is the heart of the Industrial Revolution. It's a story about amazing inventions for sure, but it's also about some of the biggest, most world-shaking changes society has ever seen. And here's our game plan. Your project assignment itself gives us the perfect roadmap. We've got the intro, the causes, the impact, the rise of socialism, and then the conclusion. We're just going to walk right through that list one step at a time, so you'll have all the key points right where you need them. Ready? Here's exactly how we'll break it down. First, we'll nail down what the revolution actually was. Then, we'll dig into why it happened, right there, right then. From there, we'll look at the enormous impact it had, which, as you'll see, leads us straight into the rise of a new idea, socialism, and the big debate, capitalism versus socialism. All right, let's dive into part one. What was the Industrial Revolution really? Well, at its core, it's all about a fundamental, game-changing shift in how we make stuff. So the official textbook definition is pretty clear. It's that moment of super fast change from people making things by hand at home to making things with huge machines in factories. And listen, even though there weren't armies fighting, you gotta understand, it was absolutely a revolution. It completely upended daily life. And this is the key. Just think about it. Before, your home was your workplace. That was the domestic system. Then, almost overnight, everything changes. Now you're walking to a giant, loud building packed with machines. That's the factory system. This one change is what drives the whole story. So that's the what. Now for the second part of your project, the why. How did this whole thing get started? And why England? And why in the mid-1700s? Well, it wasn't an accident. It was like the perfect storm of different factors all coming together at just the right time. Our source points to a few key reasons. First, you had this lingering spirit from the Renaissance where new ideas were exciting, not scary. People had the freedom to think and to say what they thought. Plus, the government mostly stayed out of the way of businesses, which really encouraged people to take risks. All of this created the perfect environment for a burst of new inventions. And when we talk about inventions, there is one that you absolutely have to know about. It completely changed the game for making clothes, which was the first big industry to get transformed. I'm talking about the spinning jenny. What's so wild about this thing is the jump in how much one person could do. Okay, before this machine, one person could spin exactly one thread of yarn at a time. This thing, invented by James Hargreaves, could spin 8 threads at once. All of a sudden, you could make cloth way faster and way cheaper than anyone ever thought possible. This single invention helped kickstart the entire factory system. Which leads us straight to Section 3, the impact of all this. Because this new industrial world didn't just change how stuff was made, it created a whole new economic system. And with that system came a whole new set of very, very serious problems. And that new system was capitalism. The main idea here is that private people, not the government, not the community, owned what they called the means of production. You know, the factories, the tools, the machines. And the goal was simple: make a profit. And while this system was incredibly good at creating wealth, that progress came at a huge human cost. This quote from our source, man, it just says it all. For the people who owned the factories, this was a golden age of opportunity. But for the average person who left their farm to go work in a city, life became absolutely brutal. And this is what that brutal reality looked like. We're talking 14-hour days, wages so low you could barely survive. The factories themselves were incredibly dangerous. No safety rules whatsoever. Kids were forced to work in these awful conditions, and the cities they lived in were packed, filthy, and full of disease. This was the dark underbelly of all that progress. So, with all that happening, it's really no surprise that people started to push back. They started to question the entire system. And that reaction to all these horrible problems brings us to the fourth part of your project, the rise of a powerful new idea called socialism.
People started looking around at this world with incredible, unimaginable wealth being created right next to the most miserable poverty. And they just asked a simple question. Is this really the best we can do? Was all this pain and suffering really the price of progress? They were convinced there had to be a better, fairer way to organize things.
And this feeling gave rise to a whole new wave of philosophers and writers who challenged the very idea of capitalism. They argued that the things that create wealth, the factories, the mines, the machines, shouldn't belong to just a few rich guys. They should be owned by everyone, by the community as a whole. Now, at the center of this huge ideological battle, you've got two main heavyweights. On one side, Adam Smith, who's basically the father of capitalism. He argued that the free market and individual ambition were the best way to make everyone prosperous. And on the other side, you've got Karl Marx, the most famous socialist thinker, who saw capitalism as a system that was built to exploit workers and was doomed to fail. Their two competing ideas would go on to shape the entire world for the next 200 years. And that brings us to our final section, which is the perfect way to wrap up your project, a head-to-head comparison of these two totally different visions for how the world should work. Okay, let's break this down because the differences are fundamental. Under capitalism, individuals own the factories, and the whole point is to make a profit. That's how you measure success. Under socialism, the community or the government owns those same factories, and the goal isn't profit, it's to make things that people actually need. So in a capitalist system, decisions are made by millions of people through supply and demand. In a socialist system, the government makes those decisions, trying to plan out what society needs. It's a completely different answer to the question of who's in charge of the economy and why. So here's the final thought. The smoky, noisy factories of the Industrial Revolution might be a thing of the past, but the questions they forced us to ask are more alive today than ever. How do we create wealth without creating so much suffering? How do we balance freedom with fairness? Which system, in the end, actually serves society best? The Industrial Revolution unleashed that debate on the world, and we are all still living inside of it, trying to figure out the answer.